I'm Sam Chittick. I'm the country representative for the Asia Foundation in the Philippines, and it's my great honor to welcome you to this webinar this morning on behalf of the Asia Foundation. As everyone's seen, we have a fantastic spread of speakers to present both the paper and the reflection exercise that the Asia Foundation has done, but also some of the leaders and shapers of coalitions from around the region who are joining today. So we're really looking forward to an interesting presentation and interesting discussion. The Philippines, of course, has had as one of our key cornerstones of the way in which we try to achieve positive change, working with and alongside coalitions. And we're very grateful to have one of our experts and leaders here today, who will be introduced shortly, but also all of those others joining from across the region. For the Asia Foundation, this paper and the reflection process that led up to it really round the way in which, one aspect of the way in which we work, in the broader efforts to improve development, both by reflecting on how we work, the way in which we work, and what actually helps to move forward for positive change in the kind of work that all of us and all of you are doing together. This builds on our long experience in the world of thinking and working politically, and particularly around how coalitions are that catalyst and that vehicle for positive change. I'm really excited for the talk and the presentation today, so it's a great honor to welcome you all here. I'll pass now to my colleague Peter Yates, and then we'll go forward into a discussion which will be moderated by Lisa Denney, and the two of them will introduce our leaders and movers and shakers from across the region. Good morning, everyone.
Thanks so much, Sam. And yes, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon if you're joining us from other parts of the world. It's really great to have you join us today. And the core part of this event today is really hearing from, as Sam says, our movers and shakers who have been at the forefront of coalition building efforts across the region. And before we do that, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about the publication itself as a framing tool. The publication has been out for a while now, so we all hope you've had a chance to, but we did just want to run through some of the key things around the who, the how, and the what of coalitions to frame the discussion today before we jump into those case studies. So if we jump onto the first slide, here we just want to quickly give you a definition of how we define coalition. So here, the definition the publication uses is that a coalition is understood as a tactical alliance of groups and individuals pursuing a tangible social or political change that they cannot achieve by working individually. And so here, that coalition is a mechanism that leverages the collective competencies and energy. Coalitions are convened, obviously, to achieve outcomes, and quite often they're disbanded afterwards. So that goes to this point of them being tactical alliances, right? They're not always, sometimes, but not always, long-term efforts of complete alignment between actors. They're tactical in nature, trying to achieve specific outcomes. And those outcomes can either be formal changes, for example, particularly in relation to policy changes, or they can be changes to the informal rules of the game, so to incentives or ideas or behaviours of the context of the community in which they're operating as well. In defining what they are, we often find it helpful also to define them against other mechanisms that I talked about quite a bit. And so on the next slide here, we highlight how they are different from both an organisation, a movement, and we also talk about a network. So in terms of an organisation, coalitions are different because coalitions' constituent parts are likely to retain their separate entities. So this is not about a full alignment and bringing together into an organisation, obviously. And they stand apart from a movement because coalition members do not seek to impact solely through their size. And quite often, actually, their key strength is that they can move with agility as they navigate the complex context, allowing them to make quick decision-making processes, move much quicker than large-scale movements can. And then importantly, and probably the one that has most similarities, is this idea of a network. And the way we differentiate between the two is because coalition members share goals and are committed to joint action, while networks generally and are often focused on the sharing of knowledge or information as much as they are designed to promote collective action. Now, obviously, some networks do have the achievement of collective action goals as part of their efforts, and that's where there is a kind of a blending of this concept. But many networks have the information sharing platform element as their core, at the core of their being, and that's where we see a differentiation between the concept of coalitions and networks. So why are we talking about coalitions? And why is it something that the foundation has invested in for a long period of time? Here we find it quite useful to draw on 3 quotes that sort of tell the story more broadly about how we've understood development over the last couple of decades. So the first one here is by Rachel Kleinfeld, and is really this idea of how development happens. This is the quote where we draw the name of the publication from, this idea of thinking about coalitions as sailboats tacking in the wind. And it stands against this idea and often the narrow parameters that development efforts are put into, which is this idea of them being on a linear train track. And so coalitions respond to this idea that you need a non-linear trajectory and reject the idea that a linear pathway is going to achieve the outcomes that we're after. The second quote here by Wheeler and Leftwich highlights what we've learned over the last decade about the centrality of institutions in pursuing development outcomes. So coalitions not only place institutional change as the key outcome that they often seek, but really importantly, they seek to understand and leverage these informal and formal rules of the games, but particularly the informal ones, to achieve this sustainable change that they're seeking. This is really central to the identity of a coalition. And then finally, that third quote we've got there from Hickey and Kelsall speaks to how coalitions engage with this concept of the political settlements that exist within the context in which we operate. So they recognise that settlements usually pursue outcomes for a narrow band of society, and coalitions offer a pathway of achieving broader outcomes within the existing settlement, while also hopefully contributing to a broadening of that settlement itself. I think this concept is really important, and it's been kind of built upon. For those of you who have read Stefan Durkon's more recent book that came out last year, Gambling on Development, which developed this idea of a developmental bargain, where you see in some countries that the political settlement does have incentives in place to shift from just protecting their own interests to gambling on a growth-based future. And I think this is a really interesting intersection and something where coalitions and coalition work really does engage with those efforts, identifying opportunities, identifying actors or institutions where positive deviance is occurring, and really engaging with those, often as key members of the coalitions that are put together too. Now, as the publication outlines, the foundation has been engaging in this work for quite a long time, and the publication highlights 6 case studies where foundation teams have initiated coalition building efforts to facilitate locally led and sustainable change. The teams achieve this change by fostering the relationships between powerful actors while amplifying the voices and influence of those less powerful as well. The teams realise that coalition-driven achievements in areas that have often eluded more traditional technical assistance efforts, because team members and the coalitions they support understand that change, whether to formal institutions or those informal norms and values, is primarily a political process that requires careful navigation, intensive learning, and intellectual and emotional adaptability. So how do coalitions achieve these results? Well, as I said before, coalitions tend to be goal-oriented. Their endpoint is determined by the achievement or not of a goal, that is, a particular policy or institutional reform or a broader process of structural change. The pathway or the goal may change on the way to the reform if influenced by a change in the context or new information. Therefore, coalitions are well suited for underpinning programs that are grounded in a contextually sound and politically informed theory of change, and that are adaptable as implementation proceeds. Coalitions have multiple members and forms of leadership, which can allow development practitioners to avoid the danger of treating leadership as an individual skill or quality rather than a collective process, a common prejudice in development theory and practice, as we all know. Thus, program managers also avoid the risks around supporting individual reform champions. Governance programs often suffer from investing in an individual reform champion, particularly those working in government, who we so often know simply move on after a couple of years, leaving the program lagging. Successful coalition approaches actively seek out positive deviance, as I mentioned before, by both creating and protecting environments that encourage actors who are naturally motivated to do things differently, to experiment, with the assumption that breaking down silos and building connections between similarly enthusiastic individuals and organisations will have a multiplier effect on momentum for change, this idea of synergy. So if we jump onto our next slide, just to quickly, again, give the framing of why this paper came out. What we really wanted to do with it was to examine who the coalitions are comprised of and how they function. I think the paper does a really good job of highlighting the diversity of the different forms of coalitions that have cropped up in different ways in different contexts. We wanted to articulate the role the foundation has as an INGO in supporting, in catalysing and enabling in them. And we also wanted to shed some light on how external actors might support these forms of local collective action in other contexts as well. So really, as I said at the top, at the heart of this work are the fantastic case studies that have been described in the publication. And we've got the fantastic contributors to several of these case studies joining us today, and I'll hand over to them in just a moment. But for those of you who have perhaps read the paper a while ago or haven't had a chance to read through it fully, just to give you a sense of the different coalitions that are outlined. The first one, led by Sam, who introduced us, is in the Philippines, the very well-known program Coalitions for Change that has been operating since 2011. Pursuing policy reforms that improve the lives of Filipinos by supporting inclusive economic growth, social development, governance and peace. The case study itself draws on examples of achievements within major tax policy and electoral reforms, but this program is now up into the dozens of formal policy reforms that have been achieved through the efforts of coalitions that have been pulled together. The second case study comes from Sri Lanka and is really drawn on the efforts of coalition forming across levels of government, so across national, provincial and local levels of government, that has created space for decentralisation, which has been a core effort of the constitution in Sri Lanka and development outcome, in pursuit of development outcomes over the last few decades. The third one is a private sector example from our Timor-Leste office, which is really about the convening of the private sector together, and in this case into a formal coalition to achieve outcomes in the tourism sector. The fourth one comes from Bangladesh, which is about navigating the divisions that existed within the leather sector, a sector that has massive economic potential, but was really being tied back by the environmental constraint and damage that was being caused by that sector in particular. And so it saw a bringing together of a whole range of actors, counterparts in 2 ministries, representatives of export marketing companies, trade unions, other partners in the tannery industry. And it eventually led to all parties reaching a consensus sufficient for the relocation of that main tannery site that had been in Dhaka, including an agreement between the government officials and business owners over land ownership at the new location as well. And finally, the final 2 case studies, one from Nepal. So since 2017, the Foundation's Nepal team has been strengthening the links between actors in the data sector to improve the availability, the accessibility and use of data by government, civil society and the private sector. They facilitated a community of practice and knowledge hub for organisations and people that produce, share and use data for development outcomes, known as Open Nepal Community. The coalition's 10 members include Nepal's National Federation of NGOs, a social enterprise, a media organisation, several civ tech companies, and development and human rights advocacy organisations. Over several months, the COP coalesced into a formal but loose coalition with a broad open data agenda, supporting several key policy reforms. And then finally, in Thailand, the Foundation's team there have convened a small coalition of 15 school principals committed to key policy reform to brainstorm and collaborate on research in the education sector. So in a short time frame, with support from the Foundation's team, the coalition has helped to create a discourse on educational leadership that underpins new reform priorities within the Thai education sector as well. So you can see here really diverse examples, obviously across different contexts, but also diverse examples in terms of the formality of the coalitions, the nature of how they've operated, the length of times with which they've operated, and of course, the diversity of actors that have been involved in them as well. I'm going to stop there and hand over to my good friend, Dr. Lisa Denney, who is the Deputy Director of the Institute for Human Security and Social Change at La Trobe University. She's also an independent consultant. Lisa's worked closely with the Asia Foundation for a long time now, thankfully with our team, the governance team, but also with a number of our country offices as well. She also works with ODI and a number of other development organisations and aid programs. She's worked extensively and has been really a leader in the work of political economy analysis, thinking and working politically, and the politics of developmental change. Lisa, over to you.
Thanks very much, Peter. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm living and working on here in Australia. That's the Wurundjeri people here in Melbourne, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and continuing, and also to welcome any Indigenous people who are with us in the audience today. I am delighted to have a very diverse group of people to speak to us today with experience across a number of the coalitions that Peter spoke about, and I'll just start by briefly introducing them. So we have Melisha Ghimire. So Melisha is the co-founder and managing director of the Shequal Foundation, a not-for-profit organisation that leverages the power of education to empower women and girls across Nepal. Melisha is also the managing director of Code Rush, a startup that offers innovative solutions to talent acquisition challenges faced by the tech industry. As an engineer turned social entrepreneur, Melisha believes in driving change in Nepal through the strong establishment of women in STEM. Second, we have Sam Aluwihare. So Sam is a dedicated and passionate senior leader within the East Timor Trading Group with over 15 years of professional experience. He's responsible for strategy and leading the execution of the East Timor Trading Group's vision and mission, and is focused at the moment on further enhancing the group to international standards within Timor-Leste. And he was also a founding member of Timor-Leste's first tourism industry association, the Hotel Owners of Timor-Leste. And he currently serves as their chairperson. Third, we have Rehana Akter Ruma. So Rehana is the head of projects and program in the Bangladesh Tanners Association, where she looks after the association's projects with the World Bank, GIZ, the Asia Foundation, and many other international partners. Rehana is also a member of the National Plan of Action Working Committee to implement labour laws in the tanneries. And she has 23 years of experience working in human resources and is also an experienced trainer in a range of areas related to labour laws, occupational health and safety, compliance issues, to name just a few. And finally, we have Robert C. So Robert is a transport and planning expert who has served as the senior advisor for the Department of Transportation's Office for Planning and Project Development in the Philippines. Here, he's provided support and advice to the National Transport Policy and a range of other transport policies and programs. He's also served in various roles in the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank for over 30 years. And Dr. C is also a columnist in the at the Manila Times, where he regularly writes pieces on issues related to sustainable mobility and urban development. So welcome to our panelists. I think we're going to start this session by asking a few sessions of the panel before we'll then open up to questions from all of you. So please feel free to use the Q&A function in Zoom. You can find that at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and make time to come to as many of those questions as we can. All right, so let's say that everyone listening has been convinced by Peter's presentation and agrees that coalitions are a valuable way to support development. I wanted to spend a little bit of time with each of the panelists in getting into the nitty-gritty of exactly how that's done a little bit more. So Sam, I might start with you in the Timor case, and I wondered, how did you go about first identifying coalition members and bringing them on board? What considerations and strategies were important in doing that?
Sure, and thank you, Lisa, for the question. I just wanted to say I'm very grateful to be here. So thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about Timor-Leste and our journey. So for those that don't know much about Timor-Leste, it's a very small nation. It's one of the youngest nations in the world that's located just between Australia and Indonesia. But being here in the country for the last 10 years, it's such an amazing country with such a rich heritage and culture, being part of the Portuguese colony, and then also being neighbors with Australia and Indonesia, being very strong in tourism. There are historical elements that Timor shares with its neighboring countries as well. The country itself also has beautiful landscapes. It's got a very diverse marine life ecosystem. But one of the challenges that the country has been facing over the last 20 years, it's a young country, and it's been trying to get its 2 feet on the ground so that it can grow its economy, and provide value and opportunities for its people. But very much dependent on oil and gas. So one of the strategic elements is, how do we diversify the economy so that the country can sustain itself, over the next 50 years and provide opportunities to future generations. And tourism, the belief is that tourism is one of these avenues in terms of diversifying the economy. But being an operator of tourism businesses, I run some F&B outlets and previously running a hotel in Dili, which is the capital city. There are challenges with all the opportunities that there are. Back in 2017, it was through a very informal conversation with maybe 2 or 3 hospitality leaders and Gobi Rajalingam from the Asia Foundation. We said, look, why hasn't tourism taken off? We all see the beautiful landscape and beaches and the wonderful people in the country. What's inhibiting that? And we had a very transparent discussion to say, look, we believe that there are a number of operators that are facing similar challenges, and they all see the opportunities ahead. So it's through that very informal coffee conversation that, it was suggested and then hosted by the Asia Foundation early 2018, where they brought together about 18 hoteliers and owners to sit in a round table to have a discussion about tourism. And it was very frank, one by one, we went around the room and we all saw the opportunities, but we also faced challenges quite openly in different areas in terms of connectivity to the rest of the world. How do we market ourselves and move away from, the mindset of what Timor-Leste resonates with, Australia and Indonesia. And we said, rather than, fighting with each other and trying to take each other's market share, let's grow the pie. Let's do what we envisaged, which is to obviously grow the country and diversify the country economically, but really provide opportunities for jobs and economic prosperity for the people of the country. And so we then set out a vision, and the vision was, to 2030, and we all discussed this quite openly. We saw that Timor-Leste can have a flourishing tourism industry, but doesn't take away from its rich heritage. And we really wanted to make sure that whoever's coming into the country would be able to experience, the different traditions, because each district of the 14 districts are very different. Depending on the districts, there's coffee plantations, and it's got a very different flora and fauna, all the way out to Los Palos, where, you've got beautiful beaches, pristine beaches with a different culture as well. But we saw that there's connectivity, it's affordable and accessible for people to come into Timor-Leste from overseas, but also not only experience what's available in the capital city, but easily be able to go out to the different districts and the different towns and villages and have access to quality establishments offering tourism products with access to electricity and water. And we really wanted to focus on something that the Asia Foundation has been building, pre-2017, which was a brand in itself, which was explore the undiscovered. So that was something that we really wanted to focus on. So from that small session with 18 hoteliers, we said, look, let's work together, and build partnerships. Let's grow the pie and identify these challenges and try to, just move a couple of these challenges here and there so we can sort of see growth in the tourism industry. And in 2019, we formally legalized ourselves and had our first board. So myself as the vice chairman back then, and we had six members of our board. And now, over the last 2.5 years, I've sort of stepped in as chairman. So that's how we formed. It was quite informal, and then we moved to a formal structure. And yeah, I suppose now we're really focused on expanding our membership and delivering a strategy over the next couple of years to achieve our vision.
Thanks, Sam. Just a quick follow-up when you were talking about, bringing in people, I guess, from across the different regions of Timor. Did you find, is the group sort of now geographically representative? Did you have to have a different strategy for bringing people from the regions on board, or how did that go?
Yeah, absolutely. Like in the beginning, we had 18 members, and we were generally focused on accommodation providers, and they were the bigger players in the market. But we said, look, if you're a guest coming into Timor-Leste, you're traveling around, you don't just come in and stay in your hotel. You go out and you want to experience something different. You want to go to an F&B establishment. You might want to go see some traditional cultural shows. You might want to go out into the districts and experience how people in those districts live and what are the arts and crafts and the niche elements of those particular districts. So we said, look, if we really want to take this forward, we have to be as inclusive as possible for micro, small, medium, large, and big businesses, but also across those different categories that I talked about previously, so that we're inclusive when we're talking with different organizations, whether it's development partners or government, or even our international partners that we work with abroad. So we really wanted to be the leading brand and beacon for the tourism industry from private sector, but it really meant that we had to expand our membership. And that wasn't easy. It involved sort of engaging and identify who are the players. So it was really through delivering our strategies that we were able to really showcase who we were and what are some of the services and value that we're providing to the tourism sector.
Thanks, Sam. And just a quick question, F&B establishments, can you spell out the acronym for us?
Sure, that's food and beverage.
Thank you, cheers. Melisha, can I check if you're with us? I was going to come to you next, but I don't want to.
Yes, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I've been running here and there because it's peak office time here.
Fine.
So
I just wanted to move on to the Nepal case. So, let's say you've sort of now identified our coalition members. How did you then get those coalition members to agree on a common goal and unite around and focus, their efforts on a particular goal? What did that process of arriving at that goal look like for you?
Hey, thank you so much for the question, Melisha. I think the first thing that I would like to highlight is the process is actually very messy, because a lot of times what happens is it's tough for all of these organizations to come together and then understand and to actually have a point where, because all of us are strong in certain points. We have been working for about 5 to 6 years. It's been about 10 years. Some organizations are already working. So just to make sure that all of us are sitting down in a table and having a conversation, that's sometimes very, very tough when it comes down to identifying who is stronger than whom, and then who is going to take what responsibilities, and then what kind of strengths and weaknesses do we have? Do we accept to these strengths and weaknesses? Because if we do, maybe there are a lot of other aspects that we need to look into. And also there are possibilities of let me say we have other works that we're already doing. So there might be projects that our teams are already driving. And then when we come down to a coalition, we call it a consortium in Nepal. So when it is there, I think it comes down with an added responsibility. So making sure that all of the members agree to a point that, okay, somewhere down the line, all of us are bounded through a common ground. There are some kind of missions and visions which all of these organizations are working together. So something that we tried and tested to do after bringing all of these organizations is we tried organizing few design thinking sessions where we focused on what kind of problems and solutions that all of these organizations are trying to solve, and what are the common grounds that all of us are practicing together so that we could bring down into one mission and one vision. So that's something that we practice. And Asia Foundation, I think, have been constantly monitoring, constantly helping up with these sessions, organizing these sessions for us. And then that's something that has helped, where we sit down in a table and then have few problems aligned, things that we want to work in. And that's something that we've always look forward to. And that's where we realize, oh, okay, so I think we have grounded by the same mission and vision. And I think we need to focus on the bigger part rather than just maintaining the space of where our strength and weaknesses lie. On the other hand, slowly, I think as casually we are growing up and then we are coming down and talking about things, making it easy for each other. We are now opening up and saying, hey, this is my strengths are. I think I can look up and take this responsibility. On the other hand, we are saying that I think my team is not good at this part. So maybe we can skip that from our side and the other organization can take up and do it. So slowly we are getting to a process of understanding each other and then saying that, okay, Shequal Foundation, Melisha and her team are good at doing strategics and planning sites, and maybe we should focus them on that part. And then maybe the other organization comes into implementation side or documentation side. And there's where we have been able to find a common ground. But a lot of times it's too tough for us to, sometimes it's tough for us to find that common ground. Sometimes it's tough for us to put into the table that what kind of responsibilities each of these organizations are going to take. It's never 50-50. Sometimes it's 80-20. Sometimes it's 70-30. It's the other organization pushing each other. But I think that's what it's most beautiful, and it's amazing to see these organizations who are working for a almost similar mission in their own different sectors coming down together and saying, hey, I'm going to be 80 this time. Maybe you can contribute for the next quarter to become 70, and then we can partially come down and say we are 100. So that's something that we've experienced, and that's been an amazing thing for us as well. And sometimes we learn so much through these coalitions is that we try to implement that in our team as well, because we do have different departments, and it's tough for us to get these people because we manage people, and it's tough for us to bring all of them together at once. And sometimes we use these methods of coalition members and then we try to bring them in table, and that helps. So I would like to say the process has been a little bit messy in our side. Every year when we are trying to fix things upon different coalition members, it gets a little bit tiring. But at the end of the day, when we sit down and then we are doing these design thinking cycles, it reminds us with a fact that we are here for a mission and vision. We have a common ground that we need to sit down and solve. The impact is bigger, the pictures is bigger than what all of these organizations coming together to solve is. So that's where our focus is. And right now, I think after all of these processes, we have been quite a good consortium. We have been able to create a lot of impacts in terms of women in data, and that's something that we're really proud of. But to agree in a goal and to unite, it's always that one vision and mission that we need to look into, and we try to see what are the things that all of these organizations together are looking for it to achieve. So that's our story.
Thanks so much, Melisha. Robert, I wanted to come on to you. In the Philippines case, the Coalition on Transport that you led came together during COVID-19, sort of taking advantage of a moment to push for urban mobility reforms. So I wonder if you could tell us about the experience of developing a coalition during COVID and lockdown, as well as at that very quick pace where you're trying to respond to a political opening that you don't know will last forever.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. You know, it's one thing I want to put out there is definitely more than an individual effort. And actually, I want to say right here that it's, what we've been able to build over the last few years has really been an amazing team effort. Also quite, unexpected from my point of view. Let me start by saying that the Move as One Coalition, we basically today are working to change mindsets, because we actually need to move from having a very car-oriented approach to our transportation planning to one that's people-oriented. So pushing sustainable mobility in public transport, walking and cycling. So these are the elements that we're trying to build our coalition for. And we work on this through public communication. We do policy research. We lobby our legislators and politicians and our government officials to put more budget resources into these very important activities and initiatives. So how did this all come about? For the longest time, we had been working with a relatively small group and a few organizations, mainly composed of commuters and public transport users. And we had been, of course, very concerned with how bad things were in many cities around the Philippines. But it was during the pandemic, which actually catalyzed a lot of change in terms of our, the interest in this type of effort. And we were able to build a lot more support and grew our coalition during this period. And maybe I can explain a little bit why. I'd say it was a combination of, having on one hand, some of that lockdown situation, plus, an explosion of the use of social media. And at the same time, a group of people that had some ideas about how to actually deal with a very difficult crisis. Because at the start of the pandemic, we really had a collapse of our entire public transport system. We had buses and jeepneys not allowed to go out. People, were homebound because they could not get to work. They couldn't get to schools. This was really a total crisis. How to break out of this? And so we pushed two basic concepts. One was to improve active transport, the conditions for walking and cycling. And second is to find ways to make public transport services sustainable through a concept called service contracting. So out of this, actually, we were able to find 140 organizations that also bought into this idea, and we began to engage them. And this is how we built a much larger coalition of like-minded groups, like-minded individuals. And then we used also a larger team with access to more talent, more energy, more interest, and more passion to actually drive a lot of this activity. And so today, what I can see is that this sort of cycle continues. When you see a crisis, it also gives you an opportunity to bring in like-minded people, like-minded groups who will share your vision, share your advocacy. And this is actually one way we are continuing to grow. So even after the first few months of the pandemic, we have actually moved and grown our coalition. And with some modest successes, we've been able to bring in more people, especially young people, to join our group and to join the movement. So maybe I can talk a little bit later about how to sustain and nurture that. But what I want to say is, it has to attract people with the same passion, but it also has to be purposeful, and it also has to be in some ways fun, So actually building relationships among like-minded people is a big part also of sustaining the coalition. And that's what we try to do every day. And a lot of it is through social media.
I think that fun element is really interesting and often gets left out, I think, of a lot of development program designs, right? Rehana, I wanted to come to you regarding the longevity of the coalition in Bangladesh. The Leather Tanners Coalition has been in place since around 2012. And I imagine since then, a lot of people have, come and gone, the context has changed, people's interests change. So I wonder if you could tell us about how you've gone about sustaining the coalition over so many years.
Thank you, Lisa, for giving me the opportunity. I'm really grateful, and grateful to the Asia Foundation also to give them my description. Before that, we want to go long back, because the government has taken the initiative for the relocation from Hazaribagh to Shequal, and there are so many things happened that time actually. Because of the distance of the locality from Hazaribagh to Shequal, first of all, the main impact was happened to the people who are working in the tanneries in Hazaribagh, so that they can go to the Shequal for a long distance. That was the first impact of the industry that time. So that was our major challenge to keep them in the industry, but it was not happen. And the new places, it was there are no more workforce there to work in the industry. So we face so many challenges, but we have a vision, long vision. First of all, the government, and I'd like to share the cooperation of all of the development partner of Bangladesh, mainly the Asia Foundation. So here, the development partner play a big role to keep them sustainable to the industry. And you know that Bangladesh is a country we are very much rich in garments, and we are exporting garments. Our main export-oriented sector is garments. But you know that leather sector is the second highest, would be the second largest industry. But here, what we do, the government has taking so many initiatives, but for the implementation level, we are looking forward for the different people who are very energetic, who has the strength to implement levels. So when as an association member and representative, Bangladesh Tanner Association play a big role. All the players who are working in the industry, they came to us, and as we have a common goal, common vision to achieve, like this year, before that, government has taken initiative to achieve a export target, like by the year 2030, we'll achieve 10 to 12 billion dollar. But to achieve this goal, we need to first develop our infrastructure and other compliances issues. In this area, what we did, we just find out what is our hindrance obstacles. Then we go to our different players who are working in the industry. So we are working with the GIZ, Germany. We are working with Solidarity Network Asia. We work with different players like Bangladesh Labour Foundation. The Asia Foundation is the main, our development partner, besides that FNV for medical support, and the EC4J World Bank, ILO, different players are there. So actually, we are grateful to all of the players of the development sector who help leather industry to keep us alive, to move the industry to go further. So sustainability actually is a public-private partnership also. Public oriented companies are also playing a big role to make the policy and to make how to we go for further. So I think it's the achievement of public-private partnership as well as the too much involvement of the development partners in our industry. That's it.
Thank you, Rehana. That's great.
Okay.
I was going to take a couple of questions from the floor. I see actually at the moment we've got just one. That's okay. I have a long list of questions myself, but for everyone else listening, please feel free to add some questions there. The one that's there at the moment is about how you determine success. Now, for a coalition, obviously success ultimately is the change of the particular policy or reform that you're after. But in between that, what success indicators or waypoints or markers do you use to know whether you're working towards achieving the reform or not? This is just to any of you, so please feel free. Rehana, please feel free to start.
Yes, I think before 2018, our position is that the mindset of the tannery owner or the people who are working in the industry is like, we are just doing business. We don't need to do any compliance or any other issues. We just purchase the leather and we'll sell the leather. That kind of mentality they have. But when we see that we are developing and we are graduating, and by the year 2026, the world has stopped so many things. So when we started the work, at this moment, what we see in our industry, they came to us to know about how to comply the social, environmental, and others issue. I want to give thanks to the Asia Foundation. The first step has started. We have done with Asia Foundation. That we very closely. We started work in 2018. At this moment, no industry is there who are thinking about the compliance. What we did, we started some work as a piloting with 10 tanneries, like occupational health and safety issues. And we have completed 15 tanneries of OSH gap assessment. And they are doing very good. And after that, we have started another work as the compliance of M4E BSCI with 10 tanneries. These 10 tanneries has done the gap assessment successfully. And the success, if we determine the success, the 2 tanneries has already applied for M4E and BSCI assessment. And Melisha, most important thing is that after doing the thing with the 15 to 20 tanneries, some of the tanneries and the owner came to us to know about how we can involve with this work. So first thing we have achieved, we can change the mindset. Here, Robert has told one thing, that some challenges give us opportunity. And we can say that the barriers make us the opportunity or this good sign of this sector. If we fulfill the things that the leather sector would be the highest export earning sector in Bangladesh. Another thing is we create another leather policy. We develop leather policy. We developed so many different coalition with different strong player who can resolve our present issues and the future issues. So in that particular reason, we can say another thing, that another partner can realize that we need to focus this sector. And that's why, the Leather Development Forum already has reformed. So this coalition is a big platform to mitigate the issues, because for an example, that we are working mostly the social compliance issues with the Asia Foundation, but they don't have that another mandate like the environmental issues. But we are struggling for the CETP and the solid waste management. But there were another partner like Solidarity. They are working through the Solidarity. Recently, we are struggling for the solid waste management, and That was not any development partner is not directly working on this. But recently we had a meeting with the Solidarity Network Asia. They told us that, okay, fine, we can work with you on this particular issue. Another issue is Asia, to our survey and to work with the Asia Foundation, we have found that there are a big opportunity to use our solar energy. Okay, but at this moment, if we go to implement the solar energy savings, there are no partner. They came forward to us. But another Palm Netherlands, they coming to us. So Solidarity help us to implement the solar safe energy issues through Palm Netherlands technology. So that kind of work, coalition for the terms of coalition can give us the insights, and we can move forward through coalition. And in this particular scenario, Melisha, Denney, I can say that Leather Development Forum is a big forum, but it's really infant level. We are not yet determined, and we need to nurture the baby. Actually, LDF is a baby. We need to nurture, and for if we nurture the baby, it could be a very big platform to mitigate the sector's issues, because the strengthened role player is there. So whereas that one partner is paying, the another can come. So in that way we can go. And in this particular issue, we need more fun, because now the Asia Foundation is playing the secretariat level, but it couldn't be possible to the Asia Foundation can play the role. Might be BTA will play the role, but how the secretariat go on? So I think you should think about
this issue. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, you should think about this, I think.
And I do want to come back to the role of development partners, but interesting that, on this question about monitoring and how you know whether you're on the right track. I mean, you had some very practical ways of seeing that what you were doing was making progress, even if you hadn't achieved that big reform. Robert, I think you wanted to come in and say something on this.
Yes, on that question, right now our focus in the coalition is to try to attract more budgetary resources for the initiatives that we consider most important. So in terms of the transportation and mobility sector, it's budgets for things like sidewalks, accessible infrastructure, bike lanes, and then support also for what we call our road-based public transport industry. And this is where we have seen a huge gap in terms of funding over the last few decades. And, like Rehana was mentioning, you need a mix of different, in a way, players and actors to help you push for the reform. It's never easy, especially when you have many vested interests in a sector. But what in a way, a benefit of a broader coalition is you can draw on networks. And also sometimes you need to have like a good cop, bad cop approach, You need to have carrots and sticks, right? And so this is where having different people in the coalition with different relationships can help push for the reform. So this is how we have been navigating through this sort of landscape.
Thank you, Robert. Melisha or Sam, did either of you want to come in on this point about how you measure success and whether you're on the right track short of the full reform?
Maybe I can add a little bit. I agree with Rehana and Robert. I mean, when we first formed, we were quite organic in terms of, trying to develop a strategy. So we all knew what the vision was, and then we developed a strategy. But the fact that we had sort of organized ourselves through an association and got the word out there that we are here, it then allowed other relationships to form. So obviously with the Asia Foundation helping us, but we've also established relationships with other, entities and organizations who are working in the tourism space. USA Tourism for All, DFAT and Market Development Facility. And as part of developing our strategy, we then just found that there are synergies on our goals and objectives. And it's once we, start to sort of sit down and discuss, okay, well, what are the different goals and objectives and what role can we play in tourism? Maybe marketing related, it might be training development related, it might be, building partnerships with government and other organizations overseas. We all then, take a different part, and going back to Robert's comment, bad cop and good cop, that's sort of what it works. We support one another in different ways to achieve our goals. I think one of the benefits with, an association working with a development partner is the development partners have strong governance and systems in place, which help to then put tangible goals in place, in the form of outputs. And then it allows, the associations to then say, okay, well, have we succeeded? Have we said what we were going to do? And then review to say, all right, well, has it been successful? What do we need to tweak? How do we need to adjust the strategy to then achieve the vision? So I think it's definitely beneficial for coalitions to form with development partners so that administration and governance can be built through those relationships.
It connects nicely to one question I was going to ask of all of you, which is about the role of development partners. I know we've got a few development partners in the audience. A number of your coalitions have received support from different development partners, and I wonder what that has taught you about what you find works well and what works less well in terms of external support for coalitions. While you think about that, Robert, there's a very quick follow-up question for you in the chat, which is, are there any examples of carrots that have worked for you? You mentioned the sort of carrots and sticks approach. Yeah,
I want to say the one very useful carrot is to give government officials or politicians credit for meaningful support for the reform. Whenever they say the right things, we put a beautiful picture of that person out on social media with a nice, sort of the quotation and praising, their effort to support a particular reform. So these small things count a lot, especially if we spread this on social media. That enhances, I guess, the popularity and also gives that person recognition. So this is one thing where coalitions can actually be very influential, especially today using, social media tools.
Great example. Thank you, Robert. Melisha, can I come to you on the questions about development partners and what works well and less well? There's another follow-up question which puts it much more succinctly than me, which says, what's your one message to donors, current or potential?
So I think for the development partners, Sam answered. I was actually going to say the same thing. It's always their way of approach, and then they already have a certain kind of milestones that they're set in terms of monitoring and evaluation. And also when it comes to looking over certain kind of aspects of work, they have a very different angle. And then when you sit down with them, a lot of times you learn so much within your workflow processes, and then they teach you to look into certain challenges and opportunities from a very, very different aspect where you've never thought about or never even expected. And also they bring a lot of expertise in terms of, like, when we talk about Asia Foundation, I think it's not just us who are coming together. We are a lot of other experts from all around the globe who are giving us suggestions, who are telling us how to take up challenges. They're bringing in opportunities for us, and it's never, our hands are always full. It's never like we're never not doing something or not discussing about some things. It's always the next week or the other. We're always engaged in some kind of discussions. And somewhere down the line, I think as a not-for-profit organization working for one particular impact, it's very, very important for us to have these discussions, because I think in our part of the world, these discussions are not that it's rare. It's very rare. And a lot of times me and my team, we always are seeking out to learn from other partners, to understand, because there are challenges, there are sometimes it's challenges which we've never thought about. They come to our table and we don't know how to navigate that. But a lot of times when we work with development partners, they're very helpful in terms of finding all of these things. On the other side, when I talk about a consortium and then the relationship with development partners, something that I see is the dependency. So the dependency is super high, and then we don't even consider finding other partners, or then we are sometimes so restricted in terms. It's not development partners' fault, but we are having our time, and then we don't even try to break that box and go out of to find any other partners or other development agencies, or even maybe donors and agencies who can help us to make this grow into a better impact. So right now, I think our consortium is focusing on how do we become more and more independent in terms of breaking these notions of having prerequisites or pre-existed donors and then partners and development agencies. How do we move forward and talk more and more about our consortium so that people hear about us and know us? They do know within our ecosystem, but yet I think we don't talk about ourselves enough. And then we don't, as I think Robert said, we don't try to highlight our carrots as much as we can so that we could bring in others. So that's we have a very safe blanket when it comes to development partners, and we're happy with that safe blanket. So that's something that I've realized within our consortium partners, that we're a little bit scared in terms of finding other development partners and bringing in other perspectives. But I think we have more pros than we have cons there, because it has given us a lot of experiences and opportunities all at once. So that's something that I would like to say. And the other side, I think the question was, what's our message on donors, current and potential? Probably I don't have a lot of message for them, but a lot of times we meet a different kind of donors, and then some of the donors are truly involved within the project and the impact, and they want to see that outcome. But a lot of times what happens is we as a not-for-profit organization, as we work for women and girls and children, it's tough for us to bring that tangible outcome in day one. We are working for gender equality. We're working to collect gender equality data. And then a lot of times these processes has been forced to us for generations. Patriarchy and all of these things, the society, how we are preached, how we're grown up, it's a very longer process. And then some donors are expecting us to bring these changes from day one, the day they've started investing, or say that they've started funding in a project. And that's not how it works. When it comes to impact, I think it's a longer day journey. It's a very it's a very careful journey. You're working with someone's life. You're trying to change their perspective of mind, and then giving them a lot of things. You have to cater their environment. So it's not just a one day or a short of things that, okay, we are donors, we have given you the capital of what resources required. Now it's your time to make the change. And all the responsibility now falls down to your soldier, and you're like, okay, so are we actually responsible? Are we the only stakeholders who are? Because all of these fights, I think it's not just ours, it's all of us together. And then that's what we've always said. We always pick our donors and partners according to these requirements, because we don't want all of these impact and then outcome to come down to our soldiers. Though we are focused on bringing it, yes, we are working for that, but we still don't want that the outcome to be considered just by our hands, from our side, from our soldiers. So that's something that I would like to give a message. Thank you.
Thanks, Melisha. The questions are now coming thick and fast. So for our other panelists, any quick responses to what would you tell donors, current or potential? Sam, did you want to go next?
Yeah, if that's okay. Just adding on to what Melisha was talking about. It absolutely isn't a sprint, it's a marathon when we're trying to make change. And so whilst we do need to monitor and evaluate on a periodic manner, we also do need to look long term. So I think sort of one message for development partners is to help, these coalitions that are forming to be sustainable. Because our vision is thinking long term. And we don't want to stop after 1 year or 2 year time. We want to continue what we're doing and evolve with as the country develops and grows and changes as well. So I think these partnerships need to be sort of strategic and long-term with a focus that these coalitions are sustainable, and how they can then administer themselves with the support of development partners or in autonomy. I think that would be a fantastic result if these coalitions can go and run themselves on their own and have their own sort of administration and how they manage their outputs and goals. So I think that would be one thing I'd probably like to add.
Thanks, Sam. Rehana, yes?
Yes. Actually, Lisa, the different development partner has different agenda and mandate. So there are many more issues, but maximum development partner working with the stakeholders like a short-term goal, like 6 months or 1 year. What happened in that way, the small things are going to happen, but the long-term things we couldn't achieve through this. And the short-term work, what's going, as Melisha said, that we stopped somewhere, that we couldn't move forward. So a long-term thing that like 3-4 years or more years, work or mandate agenda will achieve the much more bigger vision. So we think that way the coalition, if we think like that coalition, see the long vision, so that the industry could be sustainable. Otherwise, actually, we go somewhere that we can we'll move again back. That is happen at this moment. So you think about that in a bigger vision, the coalition, and that could be sustainable.
Thanks, Rehana. And I'm going to come back to you on a related question in a minute. Robert, please.
Yeah, maybe just to emphasize that, when we look also at development partners, it's important to be selective and to be selective, as Sam mentioned. How can the support of the development partner promote sustainability of the coalition? And this is where a good amount of trust is important, because the development partner needs also to give the organization the flexibility to navigate, through different, challenges. And sometimes it's not easy to specify a particular output, right? Even though, we need also to have that kind of discipline. So how to have that, responsiveness and flexibility. I think this is where the type of assistance can help shape an organization's future. So yeah, I want to put that out there.
Thanks, Robert. That connects with something I was going to ask about. There's now so many questions in the chat. I'm losing the questions in the chat. Hang on. I think this one's been answered. Let me jump over to it. So it says, there's a tendency to be nice and fuzzy about coalitions, and have seen many coalitions having unnecessarily long shelf lives for various reasons. Do you also have a point at which you foresee saying this relationship is over, I want a divorce? So this is a better way of asking a question than I was going to ask, is about, when do you know when a coalition is over? So, I think about the reform in Bangladesh, or the coalition, that initial goal you had of moving the tanners, was achieved. I guess at that point you could have said, great, done, let's disband. So what helps you make that judgment about when to continue and when to say, that it's finished?
No, Lisa, I think it will never be happen. Actually, we are just started the work. There is so many work need to be done. So I can say that the Tenerife industrial estate just established, okay, the infrastructure and other things. Now we are settling the issues, the utility and another issues. But most of the bigger things are not yet focused. Okay, so I can say the some of the issues like that. We don't have the, if we talk about the backward linkage, we don't have the slaughtering. We are struggling for that in all over the country. You know, the 50% the raw and hide and skin are collecting from the from Eid al-Azha, but that process we are collecting the things that are not scientific. So we are focusing on that, and it will take, we think that if we establish in a good way, in a scientific way, it will take 3 to 5 years actually. So that coalition that needed. And another thing I can say, some of the thing that the eco-friendly cleaner operation, we don't have the cold storage that in the most of the district in Bangladesh, when we collect the raw and hides, the 20% of the raw and hides are they are damaged because of the storing facility, lack of the storing facility. So the another thing is playing of the raw and hides. When the skin of the cut down from the animal, that was not cut down in a proper way. So there are so many trainings needed here. So it's not possible only from the organization and only from the government to work with that type of work. So why coalition? Coalition is a different energy, different strength they are working. So if we fail somewhere, we will go somebody, please help us, cooperate us in this issue. So Lisa, there is so many things. And another thing I must say, if I forget about that, the US is a big market, Bangladesh. Michael Kors is our buyer, but after the relocation, we are losing our brand buyer. So market access is very much needed at this moment. So the Asia Foundation can play a big role to the market access in USA, and they can find out what kind of certification, what kind of compliance issues we need. We know the LWG and then other ISO certification, but for Bangladesh, you know, the quality of leather in Bangladesh is very high. So you can articulate the different kind of issues for Bangladesh to brand buyer. So I think coalition just started. It's we don't think about the completion of the coalition. So we need coalition, and we need to strengthening the platform of the coalition, the consortium, so that this country, across the country, where this platform, these countries are here, I think we can also share our knowledge, information, and how we complete some of the particular issue and success the issues. We can exchange. We can take the Philippines Roberts successful things in our transportation sector. We can take the Malaysia's successful things, and we can also give our thoughts and information to others, as the coalition like the way could be across the country also. So they don't think about to stop the coalition. We need it so that we can survive and we can go forward, and we can move forward, and we can create the employment. We can save the people who are working in the industry as well as the country. Thank you.
Okay, so no divorce on the cards, I take it.
No, not at all.
Melisha, I wanted to come back to you. There's a question about how do you balance having a common ground within and among coalition members while also maintaining flexibility? Where and what are the non-negotiables? And I wondered if you could speak to this in particular, because I was curious, in your coalition, you know, a lot of the members were actually competitors, right? And so were there some limits as to what the coalition could work on, or how did you sort of manage that?
Okay, I'll treat this as two set of questions. The first one would be the common ground and what are the non-negotiables. I think the only non-negotiable thing is commitment a lot of times, because when there are a lot of organizations, it's too tough for us to have these commitments. Even getting one meeting to get all of them together to sit down in a table is too difficult. So I think we have now realized that one of the very, very big non-negotiables is commitment. The other is we should not forget why all of us are together here, because we do have motives of running our own organizations, yes, but on the other hand, we've come together for a common mission, and then there is certain goals that we have set for us as a consortium or coalitions. And the difference that sometimes it's too difficult for us to figure out the difference between if this works needs to be pulled down within my organizational overview, or should the consortium be a part of it and then we together do it within the consortium. So the difference between these two things is also very important for you to understand, because a lot of times in the very initial stage, I think that's one of the challenges that we as consortium face, that how do we navigate this as consortium, and on the other hand, how do we take this work within our organization, and should this be done independently as an organization or as a consortium? So there is some kind of challenges that you need to navigate through that. So for us, not forgetting why all of us are together here, and then the differentiating factor between the organization that you're working with or you own, and the other side is the consortium, and the other part is commitment, because a lot of times the accountability and commitment is missing when it comes down to, as I said, it's always 80-30 or 80-20 or 70-30. So the whole part of fight is how do we make it to 50-50? So that's something where I think that's the part. The other part where you said that, yes, I would like to say and frame it in the other way, where I would like to believe that we actually are believed to be competitors. We are actually not competitors. So we've always said that organizations who are working for the same thing are competitors. Sometimes while I'm filling some kind of forms, the question that always arises is, who are your competitors? And I'm like, no one. Because a lot of times the competition, I don't feel like it's in competition. You're working for an impact. You're working to change someone's life. And then there are ways that you do it. Maybe my organization does it from a very different perspective. We carry different values. We carry different belief. We do it in a very different ecosystem, but they might be doing it from a very different approach. So it's always a process of learning. It's more like opening each other's opportunities, and then we are more like I would like to say complementers rather than competitors. So that's how we've always viewed. Before even establishing Shequal Foundation, I think me and my co-founder Asta, we've always said that we don't want competitions. We don't consider anyone as competitors, because it's always you're working to impact someone's life. You're trying to change a girl's mindset, make them economically empowered. You're trying to teach them digital literacy, financial literacy. Where is the competition? I don't see it at all. So I've always said, even in consortium, this is not a competition. We are collaborators somewhere down the line, or we are complementing each other's work. Even in private organizations, I think that's how we need to start pursuing and then viewing things, and that's what we've always put together in the table as consortiums. We've always said that I think we complement. I think we can come together. I think we can find a common goal, and that's where we focused. And we've never sat and said that, okay, oh my God, she might take the work that I'm doing. Oh my God, even if it's okay. We're working in other provinces. They're working in other provinces. Sometimes we're talking about, hey, how you did things, how did you go to that province, and how did you meet the people, and they're teaching us, oh, you know that there is a different language they speak, you need to meet with them. So where is the competition? I still don't find it. I still don't see it. So it has always been the complementers or the collaborators. So that's how we've navigated, and we've always sat down to have bigger discussions rather than sitting down and just saying that, oh, I'm scared to share the ideas because she might or he might take it. It's always been an open space. We've taken it from a very open mind, open set of discussions, and that's how we've always set to grow ourselves. It has never been, from any perspective, we've never thought about us as competitors.
That's a very nice way of putting it, and a good lesson for the private sector everywhere. A question that I'll come to Robert and then maybe Sam with. A question from the audience is, how does a sustainable and self-sufficient coalition look like? Or what does a sustainable and self-sufficient coalition look like? Would that mean that they need to pivot into being an organization or a para-organization? So what models are there of sustainable coalitions out there? Robert, did you want to start us off?
Yeah, I guess I imagine sometime in the future that perhaps the Move as One coalition could sustain itself through like crowdsourced funding. You know, if there are stakeholders out there that will help contribute towards sustaining a secretariat that could keep the coalition activities running. I think this is what we are moving towards. In the meantime, of course, we rely on a lot of volunteer energy, plus of course development partner support. And little by little, we hope to take steps towards having a more self-sufficient existence. I just want to emphasize also that the role of the Secretariat is so important. We have one in the Move as One coalition, and its role is to keep the members of the coalition engaged. We try to keep people informed and active. We keep them aware of different opportunities. We often organize different events. But one important role is to also keep the coalition focused and strategic, because there are so many different demands on the coalition, activities, research opportunities, different types of projects. How do you keep the coalition also from, becoming stretched too thinly? And so this is where having a secretariat that's able to also keep, the decisions and activities strategic. So this is going back again to the support from development partners. This is where the support for secretariats and the people who work there is so important. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Sam, I was going to come to you next, and then Rehana will come to you. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lisa. I think in terms of our coalition, we're somewhere maybe 20-30% of the journey in terms of sustainability. So we are an association, legally a legal entity, but our board is all volunteer based. So really the way that we're sustaining ourselves at this point in time is, there are a few champions, maybe 2 or 3 champions within the board that are really utilizing their own employees from their businesses to drive initiatives forward. So that has its own challenges because, we do have commitments in terms of a strategy that we're trying to deliver, but it can be slow to deliver because we all have our businesses to run. And then when we do have spare time, we're implementing these initiatives. So it can be quite challenging in terms of delivery. Without those 2 to 3 sort of champions, the other element is that we do want to be self-sustained at some point in time. We've just come out of COVID, which had a huge impact on the tourism industry. And for us to be inclusive as much as possible, we can't rely on member fees to be able to grow our network if we're trying to sustain the industry. So we've gone temporarily on sort of a sort of waive the membership fee temporarily, so that we can, build a network, which now we have 50 members, moving from 18 over the last 24 months, and deliver a strategy. So, our strategy at this point in time, which is supported predominantly from development partners, is in marketing, training, and in public-private partnership with the government and other entities locally and overseas. But really our sort of next step to move sustainable model is to look at the services that we provide. If they are providing value to our members, then doing it on a cost fee structure, so that there's a benefit to our members, there's a benefit to the industry, and the association can sustain its administration. So my hope is over the next 12 months, if we are able to deliver these initiatives with some fees coming through to the association, that we can then hire a dedicated CEO and perhaps a personnel that can run the day-to-day operations, and the board will be sharing the challenges to the industry so that the right strategic goals are focused on with an executive team that's running the association. So that's the aim over the next 12 months. And I suppose in 5 years' time, we have a network across the country and we are fully independent and sustainable and that beacon for the industry. That's really where we're trying to head towards.
Thanks very much, Sam. And Rehana, I'll come to you for the final comment and then hand back to Samaya. I think we've lost Peter somewhere along the way.
I just want to add one thing, your previous question to Melisha and Robert, that what's the difficulties to work with the coalition. Actually, whenever we work with the different one individual partner, it's so easy to achieve the goal because of the time frame and the issues. So we can see the parameters we have achieved. But what happened that the same thing happened like Malaysia, that it's as there are so many partners. So sometimes we are confused that what will be the strategy and the goal setting, that kind of work. So secretariat must be the strong secretariat, and there might be a the strategy how to run the secretariat, and the goal we need to set for 2 years or 3 years. The consortium will work next 2 or 3 years for to achieve the goal, and what the role of the different player, so that we can understand our responsibility to do the work successfully. So I think it will be challenge, but we need to go forward for the human resource policy and other things of the consortium or coalition. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, Rehana. And I would just like to thank all of our panelists. It's been fascinating hearing from all of your experiences of a very diverse set of coalitions, but it's been very useful. And I note your sort of quick messages to donors, I think, were about, looking at the long term and recognizing that short-term funding leads to short-term results and can prevent that longer-term thinking. Melisha, your point that it's ultimately about changing people's lives and that there's a challenge in projectizing that that we need to be aware of. Being selective in order to promote sustainability, and at the heart of all of that, relationships of trust. So I think they're great messages to come out of the research. Thank you all very much, and thank you to the audience for our questions. Sorry we didn't quite get to all of them. And Samaya, I'll pass back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you for everyone who has stayed with us to the last hour and a half. A big thank you to our speakers and panelists and Lisa for facilitating this really thought-provoking and candid conversation. Obviously, this is something that we want to continue learning more about and reflecting more about. And I know there might be more coalition leaders in the room as well who are attending this conversation. So please do keep in touch and let us know. And we would love to continue this conversation on. My colleague Sule will be dropping in a link of the publication. So in case you haven't had a chance to go through it, please do. You'll learn a lot more about each of the experiences we highlighted today. But hope to see you around, and for any questions, and if you'd like to join us in this conversation, please do reach out to us anyone in the Asia Foundation or at governance@theasiafoundation.org. So with that, we can close this, and a big thank you to everyone who joined us today, and a special one to our panelists and Lisa. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.